Hello and welcome to the Dancers podcast. It is me. I don't know if this is a copyrighted beat, but I think I'm off tune enough where it doesn't really matter. My name is Dan Donohue. You are listening to the Dancers podcast. It always seems so silly to do the intro like that because so many of the people are returning listeners, but there's a new one. There's a new person hopping on the freak train right now, hopping on what I like to call the psycho circus, which is the listeners to this relatively, I would say, moderate and tame podcast, right? But anyway, I'm your host, Dan Donohue. We are live right now. I encourage people to ask questions live in the chat. I also have the Patreon link in the bottom. I'm going to hop from here onto Patreon where we do an exclusive live. And my link tree is also there if you want to look at my tickets. Look at my little stuff. Huh? Look at my trinkets. Let's start the episode. I've had such a good weekend in San Diego. I went to bed at 4 a.m. last night. 4 a.m. Been a while since I did that, but I was riding on such a beautiful high. I was riding so high off the good shows I did in San Diego that stayed up a little bit. Did a little bit of partying, as the kids say. Got my freak on, okay? And it was really such a beautiful 4 shows, 4 great shows. People came up to me after and said, "Good job." I did never take that well. I never take whenever anyone says good job, I always say it was so fun. That's my way of dealing with that. That's a good way to subvert any form of praise is when someone remarks that you did a good job, just go, "It was fun. Thank you so much. It was so fun." A person handed me a half finished bottle of wine and said, "Would you like to finish this?" Because that's what they do in San Diego. People don't understand this about San Diego. It is a place where partying and having fun is the most important thing in the fabric of the society. I talked about this on stage last night, but it's almost politics almost take a back seat in San Diego to day drinking. And that's so interesting to me. And it's such a fun place to do stand up. My last show was at this place, the place I did the Don't Tell taping that some of you might have seen, Movement Warehouse. And I am such a freak. I'm my friends have been this has come up a couple of times. Two separate friends, unprompted. They don't really talk to each other. These two friends, they're from different friend groups. Both apropos of nothing, mentioned to me that I am their weirdest friend and how that's strange because they wouldn't expect it because I'm sort of normal presenting in certain ways. I don't mean that by saying I got my eye on the ball, but as far as comedians go, here's what you don't understand. Stand-up comedians are the most disorganized, insane people in the world. I am also that, but just kind of in a slightly different flavor than many. So I think a lot of people are surprised by how crazy I am. But this is just a flavor of my crazy is I was doing the show that's at this outdoor gym. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful outdoor gym. The place is called Movement Warehouse in San Diego. They are not paying me. They are not a sponsor. I just really liked the gym. And before the show, I was getting nervous and there are kettlebells and I started to do kettlebell swings. I just can't help myself sometimes. It's like fidgeting in its own way, but I just had to swing a kettlebell and it was completely compulsive and I knew what I was doing was the act of a complete out of his mind person and I didn't care. I just had to swing this kettlebell. I don't know what it is in me that has to completely do whatever is like if there's something physical to be done around me, I have to do it. Does that make sense? If there's cornhole, I'm tossing them as hard as I can. I'm tossing those beanbags as hard as I can, not even at the hole, at the other people at the cookout. And when they get hit by them, they go, "What was that?" And I say, "You're it." I have to do stuff like that. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's wrong with me, but uh it was really fun. While the we got some questions in the chat. I got one more thing and then we're going to go into the questions. I was watching some of the boxing matches. I don't know if you know this, but Jake Paul boxed Nate Diaz last night in what could be considered to be celebrity boxing, maybe a slightly heightened version of celebrity boxing, but still celebrity boxing. And I have a very exciting announcement to the people watching this. This is very exciting. This is breaking news. If you're listening to this in perpetuity, this is breaking news for you too. I am entering my hat into the ring of celebrity boxing. That's right. That's right. It's finally come a time in my career where I need to fight someone in a cage. And a lot is said about the sort of cushy life and lifestyle of those who are quote unquote content creators. But I think it does have to be said it is the only job where when things start going downhill, you have to fight a guy in a ring. I don't know a lot of accountants where that's the case. I don't know a lot of physicians where that's the case, where their practice starts to suffer and they have to throw gloves on and fight a man in a ring. But that's where celebrity is. Celebrity is a very odd thing where I think you ride an incredible high for a few years and then you have to put gloves on and promote a fight and then perform the act of pugilism. You essentially go from pampered celebrity to a dog in a dog fight. That's the arc of most celebrities. So that being said, I'm happy to announce that I will be taking a fight. I will be. We've negotiated the contracts. It's a sanctioned boxing match. Me and former presidential candidate Mitt Romney. We will be boxing. I talked to Mitt. And let me tell you, the wholesome attitude that falls by the wayside when the cameras are off. My manager, he called me. He said, "Dan, would you like to do a celebrity boxing match?" I said, "Sure." Is it against a YouTuber, perhaps, to sort of boost my numbers in that field? Is it against a actor? An actor, so maybe I can be seen by people in that community. And my manager said, no, it's against former presidential candidate Mitt Romney. And I was skeptical, but he showed me tapes of Mitt Romney, and I have to say I was unpleasantly shocked by his ability. He has a great slip counter. He has a great uh, left hook that he can throw without a setup, much like Roy Jones Jr. And he has a god of a obscure religion on his side. So it's gonna be a tough boxing match. You never want to fight someone who has the god of a religion that is not commonly practiced on his side. Because the thing is, Christian or like Catholic God gets prayed to all the time. Catholic God gets prayed to constantly. So Catholic God is answering the prayers of so many people at once. And he gets busy. So if you're in a boxing match, you're like, please God, let me win, da da da. He's dealing with a lot of stuff. If you're practicing Mormon, much like Mitt Romney, that God is fielding maybe 2 to 3 questions a day. And so he'll get around to Mitt. What I'm saying is I hope you tune in to me squaring off with former presidential candidate Mitt Romney. Okay. Now let's get to some of these questions. Um question number 1, which is similar to the fighting stuff I was talking about. Have you tried jiu-jitsu? And if you haven't, would you? I have tried jiu-jitsu on and off. I am unfortunately somewhat prone. I wouldn't even necessarily say prone to injury, but I try to not fight through injury a lot. Let me start from the beginning here, actually, because this is a fun story. So I was in college, and I had just gotten kicked off of my track team for not performing well, and also for taking an unprompted trip to Sweden for 6 months, which coaches tend to not like. They're very restrictive, these coaches, okay? And they don't like it when you suddenly take a unprompted, unannounced trip to Sweden. They don't like, "Oh, that's against the rules. We need you for this season." Listen, coach. I'm having a hard time. I knew I was on my way out, of that college track team because I performed very well in high school track, not, like, crazy well, not as well as truly any track runner in the South, but I was in Massachusetts, so the pool of people I was competing against was much lower. When I got to college, I said I was running Division 1, but not a great Division 1, right? Not the kind of Division 1 school that tends to place in the NCAA finals, right? So I was lower middle of the pack there coming in. And then my performance just kind of completely dropped off the rails because of a little sprinkle of depression, right? Just a little piece of depression. And I always think if I was maybe given the tools to deal with my emotions, maybe I would be a better athlete, which is really funny because those two things are sometimes separated. You're sometimes told, "Oh, if you're an athlete, you bottle that up." And the great athletes, I think, do that. I think that is true. But for a mediocre athlete, I think it would have kind of behooved me to learn how to deal with those emotions. But anyway, I washed out of the track team, and I didn't have anything to do with my body, really. And I went online and I was looking up gyms, and there was a place, and I'm gonna say the name of it because I think very fondly of this place. It's called New England Submission Fighting. It's near Amherst, Massachusetts. And it was just a random gym. I just walked in, and I was very lucky that it was a very good gym considering, the general prices of a gym. It was pretty cheap. I go in there for the first day, and I've always really liked this is so stupid. This sounds really stupid, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it because it came to my mind. I've always liked squeezing. I've always been a guy who likes to squeeze. I'm a squeeze kinda guy. I give a really strong hug. And obviously I was in good shape. I walk into that gym, and I did one class and I really liked it. And then they just go anybody goes with anybody. You're essentially just doing submission grappling with people. They're not punching you in the face, but they can choke you, they can do an arm lock to you. And I got tapped out like just a bunch of times, but it just felt good in my body. I remember having that thought where I was like, "This something about this feels right." You know what I mean? Something about this just feels really good. And then I think like my 4th or 5th time there, I still obviously didn't know anything, but I squeezed a guy, in like a schoolyard headlock hard enough where he tapped out, and then I was like, "This is awesome." So yeah, I've been doing it. It's tough to be around that many people that love Bitcoin and NFTs, and that's a huge the jujitsu community is riddled with wake up and grind style people. It's riddled with NFT kind of people. It's riddled with David Goggins fans, and they're not bad. I'm not discouraging that. Some of those people are great. Some of those people need that stuff in their life, but it does get to be a bit much. It gets to be a bit much, and this is changing slowly but surely. But there is a lot of sometimes there's a lack of a sense of humor in MMA gyms and in boxing gyms. Especially humor is sort of based on a hierarchy where if you're a guy who's there and established and good, I think people will listen. But if you stink and you're trying to be funny, people are like, "Shut up." But yeah, that was kind of my my foray into now. There's also something I want to talk about. There is a big distinction if you're trying to get into a martial art of any kind, which I think is good. I really do. I'm huge, very pro boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-jitsu, karate, um, whatever you want to do. It good for your body, good for your mind. It's dynamic, it's fun. Uh, Here's a good distinction. If you want to get into jujitsu, the culture is very optimized. So it's a culture of everybody's trying to get like an edge. Everyone's trying to learn how to tweak nutrition. Everyone is trying to become like the best version of that. Muay Thai, everyone everyone just ate a really like weird meal before. Like really good Muay Thai fighters, you'll talk to them and they'll be like, "Oh, I smoked 2 cigarettes and I ate pho." And it's like, "Really?" They're like, "Yeah." And I kicked a guy in the head. And it's like, "Oh, okay. Well, that's an interesting culture, but I really do like it." So that's if whichever side you fall on, that's what you should get into. Great question. Let's see the next question. Do you believe in reincarnation? If you do, what would you come back as? I do believe in reincarnation, and I'm wrong. This is something I talk about a lot on the podcast. You can believe something personally and also know that you're wrong. I logically know that reincarnation does not exist, but I choose to believe it in my soul. I hope that makes sense in some way, in some form, in some way. I wish we had more dialogue on that sort of belief because a lot of people believe things and then feel the need to defend those things with logic. Belief and logic can be two separate things. In fact, sometimes it's a lot better if they are. If you are a Christian person and you believe in Jesus and Jesus' presence in your life, I think that's wonderful. I think it can enrich your life. I think it can enrich the lives of the people around you if you're acting more kindly towards them. That's great. But then they feel the need to be like, and here's scientific evidence. And it's like, listen, science ain't your friend. Okay? Let's not cherry pick because if we're gonna get into science, you got some splaining to do. You got a little bit of what I like to call splaining to do. So I think that your beliefs can don't need to be justified logically. I don't think everything that you do needs to be justified logically. I don't think we're logical creatures. I think we are illogical creatures. We are creatures that can use logic as a tool, but in our heart of hearts and our soul of soul, we're a little bit nuts and we don't need to constantly justify everything that we do and believe with this. Oh, well, it's also correct logic. If you look at the facts and the dinosaur bones actually don't date back in bed, it's like you don't need to do all that. You can just believe something and know it's logically wrong. I know reincarnation is logically wrong based on, I'm sure maybe there's some scientific explanation, but I don't need it. I don't need to scientifically justify this belief. I also don't want my belief to get in the way of science in any way, which I think a lot of people who have some sort of a spiritual belief do, is they think their spiritual belief needs to like halt the advancement of science or whatever. And I think it's crazy. It's not good. It's just not a good way of having a spiritual life. So yes, I do believe in reincarnation. No, I cannot defend that belief in any logical way. I just believe it. If you're a complete, like, non-spiritual that's totally fine. If you want to come at me with data where it's like, "Well, this is where the brain shuts off," it's like, that's great. Keep on doing the research. I will continue to be wrong. I am happy to be wrong. I'm happy to be dumb. I'm happy to be wrong. I just believe believe in here that there's reincarnation. What do I think I will come back as? I certainly don't live a perfect life by any means. I also will be a little kind to myself and say I don't think I live a horrible life. I think I live a pretty so let's look at the pie chart. I picked a essentially completely selfish career path, right? I could have tried to be. But here's the thing. Okay, but let me push back against myself there. If I had tried to be a doctor, I very well may have done more harm than good. My handwriting is so bad, I think someone would end up getting something that they weren't supposed to get, and it would be on me. So, I would go ahead and say, we'll call my career path neutral. Um, I recycle sometimes, but not always, so that's pretty neutral. I think I would come back as a good version of a mediocre kinda animal to be reincarnated as. Not to say there's any mediocre animals, but I think I think, like, an eagle or something would be, like, top tier animal to be reincarnated as. I think a little otter would be top tier animal to be reincarnated because you get to be a little cute guy, and that would be cool. I don't think I would be an otter, I don't think I would be a bald eagle. I think I would be like a really high esteemed warthog. I think I would be I would be a warthog, and before you start thinking like, "Oh, you're being too harsh on yourself." I think I would be like, the mayor of the warthog. I think I would be a warthog where other warthogs would look at me and go, "Oh my god, that warthog is, like, cute." "Oh my god, that warthog is, like there's something about that warthog over there that I really like." It's a really good question. I really like that. Um, let's see. We got some more questions here. What was your favorite show as a kid? My parents hated it, but I loved Ed, and Eddy. Ed, and Eddy was a great show that promotes stupidity in children, and I think that's good. I think it's good. It promotes excessive candy eating and excessive stupidity in American children, and that was great. A lot of people talk about, like, the golden age of television that was sort of the '90s. You had Fresh Prince, you had Full House, you had all these very popular, iconic TV shows. Seinfeld, I think, was still going on, but I could be incorrect about that. I wasn't big in watching Seinfeld. My family was not a TV watching family. My parents didn't really watch TV. My sister didn't really watch TV. I was addicted to television as a kid, but I would essentially only watch things that played on Comedy Central and then sometimes Cartoon Network, which is why I think in big part I got into comedy because I would watch the Comedy Central half hours that they put on, and boy, did that destroy my brain. It's so funny looking back on that because some people's introduction to stand up is Eddie Murphy in Raw. Some people's introduction to stand up is like Louis C.K.'s big specials. But my introduction to stand up were these kind of shabby half-hour comedy specials that these comics would do. I didn't really have a sense of who was famous and who wasn't when you're a kid. Like if you're on TV, you're just on TV kind of. But I did have like some vague idea that these people doing these Comedy Central half hours weren't multi-billionaires. You know what I mean? I had a sense that these were just kind of working road comics, except for Dane Cook, who had one of the early Comedy Central specials and it just blew up like crazy. For all the other ones, I mean, they've gone on to do great things. Some of them, like Eugene Merman, had a great early Comedy Central half hours. He made Bob's Burgers. Uh, who else? Who else? Dion Cole who has had one of the best careers of all. I love Dion Cole so much. So I would watch a lot of really weird uh TV show. Strangers with Candy was a big show. I believe Stephen Colbert was in that, like a young Stephen Colbert. Like kind of Reno 911 was one of the most formative shows. And that show, I think it's sort of getting its flowers now. That was one of the funniest things that was ever put on television. There's this big conversation about the efficacy of the portrayal of police officers in television based on recent epiphanies of the general public, because there's been members of society who have known about this for a long time, but I think the general public had a recent epiphany that there is a lot to be done and a lot to be fixed about the current system of policing, right? So there was a big, I believe it was Andy Sandberg's TV show got pulled. It was a comedy about police officers. I think even today, I think even today, Reno 911 could be made and would be well received, just because this is the thing about the power of being funny. Funny in its own way transcends good and bad. Like, something can be funny, and it doesn't mean that it's my kind of humor. It doesn't mean it's the kind of humor I wanna do or I wanna make or can even be recreated by a person doing comedy, but there are things that are funny that are just like it something can be so funny it just becomes apolitical. Do you know what I mean? Reno 911 was that, where it's like, can you watch Reno 911 and say it's pro cop? It's like, no, it's treating all these cops as like complete dinguses. Could you watch Reno 911 and say it's anti cop? It's like, maybe you could, but also, I mean, there's an endearing quality to all of the characters on Reno 911. It's this thing where if something is funny enough, it transcends political context. And that was one of them. That doesn't mean I loved The Daily Show when I was younger, right? I loved like political satirists, but something doesn't need to be that. And I'm going off on a tangent here, but there's this idea that may be correct morally, but is not necessarily correct artistically, that all stand-up needs to have a political goal and serve a greater social purpose. And I don't think that's true artistically. Maybe I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe that's better for society if comedy does serve that purpose, but I know objectively it doesn't need to. I know objectively things could be funny and just dumb. Things can be funny and mean. Funny kind of transcends a lot of stuff if it's pure. Reno 911 was that, I feel. That's how I feel about that TV show. Oh, somebody commented, I don't think quote unquote God exists and doubt there's a quote unquote spirit realm. A spirit realm? Is that, I feel like that's an anime thing. But I don't know. There's not one. Do you ever do anything in a particular way just in case God exists? Whoa. Do you ever do anything in a particular way just in case God exists? I think you've struck on something very interesting. And I think in a lot of ways, the chat at many times will come up with something that is profound beyond my creative abilities. And I think you've struck on such a good note. Do you ever do anything in a particular way just in case God exists? Some people would say that's why anyone does anything moral. I don't necessarily agree with that, but absolutely. I think when something big and important happens in my life, I feel sort of an obligatory need to have some form of communication with a higher power, right? Like, let's say something goes well in my career. I feel like I was driving back. Oh man, this is so embarrassing. Sometimes I feel I try to not overshare about personal stuff that happens in my life. Like there's stuff that's personal that I don't put out on the podcast. I think that's a healthy measure. I think that there's a level of separation I would like to keep from just, you know, social media or whatever. But I will always push through and try to share non-personal but embarrassing experiences that I have been through, and this is going to be one of those. I was driving back from San Diego last night after, again, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, 4 great shows, and they all paid, and I got my money. And so, I know that that seems like the bare minimum, but comedy wise, it is so rare. And thank you to Don't Tell Comedy, by the way. That's who was booking me, and they're great. They're great. If you ever want to see shows, look up Don't Tell Comedy. They they've they've done so much for me in my career. It's crazy. But driving back, and I'm listening to actually Artie Lang's autobiography. I love comedians' autobiographies. It's very dorky of me, but it's true. And I start listening to religious music and kind of singing along to it. I don't practice Christianity or any real specific kind of religion, but I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna sing about being absolutely blessed up for the next 30 minutes in my car. I think there's something healthy about it's definitely not a necessity. You don't need to have any form of connection with a higher power. I think people can find a lot of meaning in their lives day to day, and they can find meaning in whatever they want, their family, their job, uh their collection of ferrets, their secret collection of underground ferrets that the government will never find. But I do think that when it comes to something big happening and you're really, really grateful for it, it is nice to thank something. But I think it's also important to thank the people that actually helped you get like you could like saying thank you to God is great if you're also thanking like your mom and stuff. You know what I mean? There's a great moment in the Eric Andre show where they had a guest and Hannibal Buress said, you have a beautiful wife." And the guest said, "Thank God." And Hannibal said, "Well, thank me. I gave you the compliment." I think that's a great analogy for kind of what I'm talking about. But yeah, that like there's moments of that, and then when something really bad happens, I think you have to sit there and curse God. I think when something bad happens to you, it's very important to fall to your knees and curse your creator. I'm kidding, but I'm going to keep going with the spit. I think it's very important to do that. I think it's very important to, when something bad happens in your life, like the death of a family member or a parking ticket, it's important that you create a pentagram on your kitchen floor and you speak backwards in tongues. So that's just my belief. That's just my little belief system. Okay. That's just what happens in here. Really good question. Greetings from South Africa. I'm often very shocked. Someone in the chat said greetings from South Africa. I'm often very shocked by the fact that anyone uh, listens to this, let alone in other countries. And I'm incredibly grateful and thank you very much. And I don't know what time it is there, but good evening or good morning. And I'm never gonna learn, by the way. If I ever say, "Oh, I don't know what time it is right now in, let's say, Philadelphia," and someone tries telling me, just know that your attempts are falling on deaf ears. I have no intention or desire to learn anything about what a time zone even is. The time is what it is where I am. And everybody needs to I'll call my mom at 9 p.m. LA time, which is I guess midnight in New and it's like, "Hey, you're going to get the call. All right? You're getting the call whether you like it or not." Who would you have play you in a movie about your life? Rosario Dawson. Have Rosario Dawson play me in a movie about my life. Because I think my life story would be really funny if it was just told from the lens of a gorgeous, gorgeous woman. Everything else is exactly the same, but it's just Rosario Dawson. Rosario Dawson had to live on Killian McCaskey's couch for a year in Boston. That's a great. Rosario Dawson had to sleep in a Nissan Altima for a little bit. Hilarious. Great story. Rosario Dawson performing stand-up comedy in a VFW basement. Very good. I would pay to see that. That's a good story. Some of you might say, "Oh, why not have a handsome male actor?" Because that's not. We've heard that story before. We've heard that story before. Let's switch things. Let's mix it up a little bit. Okay. People complain about like whatever Hamilton and and like maybe there's like critiques that are valid and maybe there's critiques that aren't valid. I'm not really. All I know is I like when things get mixed up. Have me get played by Rosario Dawson and then halfway through the movie, switch it. Switch it to someone else. Switch it to Morgan Freeman. Cuz it would be fun. It would be fun for people who are watching it, the 5 people that would watch that to be confused. It would be good. I would like that. That's who it would be. And also I would get to see I would definitely try to get a consulting credit so I could talk to Rosario Dawson. Um favorite oh favorite British comedian, Stuart Lee. 100% Stuart Lee, without a shade of a doubt, Stuart Lee. Let me backtrack a little bit. So, I'm doing stand-up comedy in Amherst, Massachusetts. There's a guy there. His name's Tom. He was a teacher at UMass. He's a very funny guy. And he was talking about these comedians he liked, and he said, "Oh, and there's this great British comedian, Stuart Lee." And I was like, "Oh, I've never seen him." And he sent me like 3 videos to watch on YouTube. Stuart Lee is he's the kind of comic where I watch him and I go, "Oh, I do the dumbest form of stand-up comedy," where I work hard on my jokes. I do, and I work hard on stage, but he's just writing at another level. He's performing at another level. He knows how to work a crowd at another level. I watch him and I'm in awe. And I've read his book. I've kind of like as far as Stuart Lee go, I've kind of consumed because he has so much content too, much like me. You know, we're just a couple of guys with a lot of content out there. But yeah, I love Stuart Lee. You should watch Stuart Lee if you ever get a chance. How many chances is too many to give someone? Someone's had a bad weekend. Sometimes I read a question and I go, "Are you all right? You all right?" Whoever asked that, tell me, you okay? Because that's a question that would be asked by someone who's been through a little something, something. And that's fine. We've all been through a little something, something. How many chances is too many to give? So it depends how big the chances you have given are. Chances come in sizes. Chances aren't just one size fits all. If I say, "Hey, do you want to meet up at this bar later?" And you say, "Sure." And then before we meet up, you go, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Something came up at work." That's a small chance. I give you a small chance. You want to meet up at this bar? Not even, "Do you want to go to this bar with me?" It's like, "You want to meet up? I'll be there anyway." It's a small chance. If we have a vacation planned to Fiji and you call last minute and go, "Oh, sorry, something came up at work." That was a big chance. That was a pretty huge chance that you were given and that you cast down to the ground. It also depends how much you care for this person, how much you like them. I'll give you a little anecdote. Not too long ago, went on a few dates with a person, and they were great. They're still great. Nothing wrong with them at all. We have plans to, or they messaged me kind of last minute one day and are like, "Hey, do you want to hang out tonight?" And I go, "Sure." And then tonight rolls around and they stopped answering my messages. In the morning they said, "So sorry, I fell asleep." I was like, "Totally fine. Totally acceptable. Nothing wrong with that. A small chance." Right? And then we had plans to hang out later and they canceled sort of last minute on a later date. And they were a really cool person. They're still like great person. Have no ill feelings towards them. Just got a sense from those two chances, which I ended up being correct, that the vibe was off. And I said as much. I was like, it feels like maybe you're not so into this, and maybe you want to just be friends. She said yes, that is the case. And so that was kind of best case scenario. Where like I got a sense of something, I voiced it, she agreed, there was no hard feelings, no bad blood, still no hard feelings, still no bad blood. There's sometimes a rush to resentment. In certain people, there is a rush to resentment. There is this feeling that if someone does something that I conceive as a slight, it means that I should punish that person in my own mind. I should drag this person. I should say this person is so rude, this person so this person so that. That's in a lot of cases a self-defense mechanism that isn't always the best and isn't always the healthiest. I think just taking personal account, you can't go wrong because you're the only variable there. Like if I'm sitting there after those two things, I was like, that person's such a bad person. I can't believe they would do this to me. Me. When I get really personal, I start talking like a Pixar villain. I cannot believe they would do this to me. That voice exists in a lot of our heads, by the way. And I think a much healthier approach is to personalize it and be like, well, how is this person's actions making me feel? Take the ball out of their court and put it in yours. Like, I could sit around and wrongfully go like, they're trying to mess with me and I can't believe can't, they're so rude. It's like, or they're just a person and they have flaws and they make mistakes and so are you. So just look at what their actions are doing to you. And if you don't like them, if the actions are making you feel icky, then just say no. So when you're saying like how many chances do you give a person, depends on how those chances are making you feel. Forget about them for a sec, just for a second, right? Because you have to take other people's feelings into accountability. But consider yourself. Consider how giving those chances are making you feel. Are you is your friend canceling on you, but you're like, well, I have a lot of stuff going on. And I have a lot of other friends, so it's not really making me feel that bad. Or is it making you feel horrible? And every time your friend cancels on you, it's affecting you in a deep way. If that's the case, then you just don't have that many more chances to give, do you? Because you can only put yourself through so much. So that's what I would say. That's how many chances you should give. It's however many chances. Someone said we need Dan to date Rosario Dawson. And that chat, let me say, I don't ask you to do much except subscribe to the Patreon, which the link is below, or check out my link tree where my live dates in Des Moines and the OCR. But if someone could set that up, I would actually go ahead and say that I will completely put all the Patreon episodes out for free. If I can get a date with Rosario Dawson, the Patreon's free, just to incentivize. If anyone knows If anyone knows Rosario, let me know. Okay, this is such a great question. How to get over massive political differences with a boyfriend. This is something that's come up very often in recent history. With the dispersion of media, there's not 3 news channels to listen to now, there's 10,000. With the increased consumption of media among people, we find more bifurcation and fissure in our political ideas because those ideas are shaped by the media we consume and the images that we are given and our own life experiences. So we find that we have more differences with people, and those differences can be big and those differences can be small. I've had political differences with people I have gone on dates with that have been okay, and I've had political differences that are insurmountable, and I'll tell you my perspective on this, which might not be right, but this is how and that doesn't mean it can't change, but this is my current feeling. Political differences can sometimes simply be a question of opinion. Like, I personally think that in this country, we should work very hard towards public health care, and we should work very hard towards making a system of equitable public health care. So if someone gets sick, it does not necessarily ruin their entire lives because insurance is very expensive for certain people, and there's always going to be arguments against it. But I would say having at least some system in place that is affordable and people are able to get the healthcare that they need. I just don't think there's a way anyone could ever sit me down and justify when a mother of 3 gets cancer and doesn't have insurance, she needs to suffer. Right? And this is just my own personal belief. Now, I'm not a healthcare expert. I am not a person who's very well read even. So that's just an opinion I have. Now, if somebody, let's say, I go on a date with a nurse and she goes, "Well, actually, I think it's important that we put more emphasis on private healthcare and revamping that system because that system is so whatever." The arguments are for that. Like it's so good, the healthcare is such higher quality, whatever, whatever. That is a political difference that I could deal with because it's not necessarily something that I have that much knowledge on. It's just like a belief. Now, if a quote unquote political difference is like someone doesn't think a certain group should have as many rights as another, I think that people will call that a political difference. That goes beyond that into like a human's rights issue. And I think if someone feels that way, like a certain group shouldn't have as many rights as another group, well then that speaks kind of towards their character in a way. And you've gone beyond sort of this nebulous philosophical argument and you've gone into the direction of I don't know, uh moral shortcomings. So that's what I'll say. That's what I'll say. Um okay, so let's see here. Sorry if I'm missing any of these. If I'm missing any of these questions, I'm switching over to the Patreon in about 10 minutes, or at 2 o'clock rather, my time. So if you didn't have your question answered, you can always join the Patreon. Um, Dan, any advice on going back to school in my late 30s? First of all, before I get any deeper into reading that rocks. The fact that you're even thinking about this, I haven't read any further in the question, so I don't know what you're going to school for, but that rocks. That because a lot of people, for whatever reason, will just hit a certain age and stop their growth, and that's great that you're continuing. What do you do when you need to focus and write / get back to work? Put it on paper. Put it if you want something done, put it on paper. There's 2 reasons. One, and, like, to me, the lowest reason is it'll remind you. But I think in the back of our head, we always know we should be doing certain things. We always know we should be doing certain things. But what it really does, whatever you wanna do, write 20 minutes today. If you want to, um, build a garage, if you wanna build a second garage, if you wanna build a 4th garage that exists on the top of your house and is accessible with a ramp that goes all the way up and blocks several of your windows, right? Then that is something that you need to write down. It's something that you need to put on a piece of paper or on a chalkboard or wherever you want to write, spray paint it on the side of a building, but you need to write it down. Putting something that's in your head concretely out into the world. I'm not talking about this like weird nebulous manifestation kind of thing. I'm talking about literal, concrete expression. And when you express something, I think it becomes more real to you. So I would say certainly write it down. Uh Interesting. Oh, people in the chat are saying that a person deserves better. Listen, that's the kind of thing I want in the chat. That's the thing I kind of want in this beautiful, beautiful chat. But thank you everybody for the questions that we've asked. I'm going to switch over to the Patreon at 2 o'clock, and I can get a little bit more personal. I can get a little bit more. I can use naughty words. People can ask questions that are a little bit more lewd in nature over there. So the link is below. Please join if you want to join the fun live at 2 o'clock. But thank you all for listening. I'm doing shows in Orange County and Des Moines. You can get tickets in my link tree. That link is also below. So thank you for listening. Thank you for coming out to the shows. Thank you for being a part and taking a ride on what I like to call the freak train. Yeah, I'm going to stick to that. I'm going to stick to that. But thank you everybody for listening, watching, and as always, have a good one.